Hello everyone, Christina here. Welcome to video 2 in Retro Flowers Week. I'm actually going to be using all 3 products in the Retro Flowers bundle, including this stamp that says Get Well Soon. And then I'm going to be masking the area for the stamp itself. So I'm going to be using one of the shadow dies for that. I'm going to be making a 1-layer card today, but I do want to make it look like the grading is popped up on top of the card. So I'm going to be adding kind of like a faux shadow to it. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be using masking paper for the shadow layer. And I used the die that puts a scored line of the letters onto the mask because I want to make sure that as I place it on my card or my card front, that it will be angled to position just right. So since I can see where the letters will be exactly, it's much easier to do that. So I peeled off the release paper off that masking paper, and then using some tweezers, I placed that onto my card front. So this is an A2 sized card today, and I've stuck it down to a grip mat, and I've got the 5 layering stencils in the stencil pack. There is one stencil that has the full design, but I won't be using that today. I'm going to start with this color combo, and I'm going to explain to you where I came to the colors I'm using. So this first color, the red color, I'm going to be using Cayenne from Conquer the Ninth, which is a direct, like, that is the color from the color inspiration. But then I'm adding Spiced Cider. It's just sort of a secondary color so I can do some blending. For the mustard gold shade, I'm using Stardust and Hazelnut. So I have sort of that yellowy color, almost like a mustard, and then I've got a darker hazelnut. For the very, very pale blue in the photo, I'm going to be using the color Powder, and I'm going to darken that up a little bit with Tidepool. And Tidepool actually happens to be the next color in the color combination from this color cube number. And then I'm going to do Tidepool to Juniper for the next color. And then for that last one, I'm going to do Juniper to Rainforest. So here are all of the different ink colors that I'm going to be using today. Some of them look like a departure from this color cube inspiration. This is number 667, but in the end, it looks absolutely fabulous. So when I use my layering stencils, I like to start with the background layer first. So this is going to give me an outline of where all of the different individual images and shapes will be. So if I have the background done first, then as I do the other layers, I can make sure that they're lined up evenly within the leftover area. I'm using these center alignment guides from Altenew, sticking that to my grip mat in the top left and bottom right corners. That's going to help me get the layering just perfect. Starting out with Juniper as my background color. So I'm going to bring in Juniper kind of in those 2 top and bottom corners. And then I'm going to switch to Rainforest and bring in this very deep green color. So I started out using some big fluffy brushes and then switched to these smaller brushes from Hurley. So they're a nice dense brush with a flat bristles. So you get a really nice blend. So I wiped that with a microfiber cloth and then lift it off the stencil. And I'll clean the stencil with a little bit of rubbing alcohol as well. Moving on to the next layered stencil, I'm now going to do that kind of mustard yellow shade. So I'm using Stardust as my first color, and I actually want to concentrate the color in the center of the flowers. So there's a little bit of a blend going out. And then I'm bringing in Hazelnut on an even smaller brush. This is an Altenew mini round blending brush. And I'm adding that to those areas where I had the Stardust the darkest. So the centers of the flowers, at the base of each little circle, a center for the flowers, also at the base of the hearts, things like that. I just want a little bit of a gradation of color in each one of these areas. I love how that's already looking. Now I'm going to do Spiced Cider and Cayenne. So I'm starting out with the lightest color. Once again, I'm going to bring in this Spiced Cider, especially up here on this tulip looking flower. For the center of the other flowers and the one with the petals, I'm once again concentrating color in the center. And then I'm bringing in Cayenne and darkening up and getting that kind of reddish shade going up. I'm going heavy on the Cayenne because if you remember the inspiration, the lighter orange shade was one that I added myself. It was not on the original color palette. So I want this to read more red than orange. So I'll lift that up. Oh, I love how that looks. I'm going to add on the next stencil. And now we're getting into those kind of bluish green shades. So I'm starting out with powder, adding it to these flowers, concentrating color in the center of the flowers, and then coming in with Juniper just to darken that up so that there's a nice contrast. I'm now going to put down the next stencil, and I'm moving on to those blue shades. So I'm going to start with Tidepool. Now remember, I did powder before, and it did darken up when I added Juniper, but I want to make sure that this has even more contrast, even more color than that flower at the bottom. So I'm going to bring in Juniper and really concentrate that ink color in the centers of these stems and give it a nice dynamic shade going up into these areas. With all of this stenciling, I was trying to focus on I want there to be a dark and a light of each color. I want there to be that contrast. I don't want there to be such a smooth blend of color that there's no dynamic change in color. So now I'm going to remove the mask. You can see we have a nice clean area for our greeting. It was hard to even see the mask there. You could only see a little bit of the edge. So now I'm going to take the stamp set. I'm going to grab this Get Well Soon, and I'm going to position it in that white area just perfectly. I actually put it on the stamp backer sheet, that little piece of acetate, so I could slide it around and get it in the right spot. So for the greeting, I decided to go with the orange-red shades. So I started out with Spiced Cider, and I just stamped that down into the center of that greeting area. Stamped it twice so that I would have a really solid stamping. And then I brought in some Cayenne, and I'm only applying the ink to the bottom of the stamp. And then I'm taking that same blending brush I used earlier and kind of softening that line of ink that's on the stamp itself. So I'm softening up that line, and then I'll stamp it again, and it stamps in the exact same spot and adds a little bit of that darker red shade kind of halfway through the greeting. I then grabbed the Hazelnut Ink, and I just decided to add a little bit of a darker brown at the very bottom. And I'll do the same thing that I did before, grab a brown blending brush and soften up that line of ink so that we have a little bit more of a soft transition to the darkest color. And I think that looks really neat. At this point, I adhered my card front to the card base. I was just using a single sheet of cardstock all along. So I glued that down, and then I'm going to add my faux shadow around the greeting. So I'm using colored pencils. These are Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils, and I've sharpened the pencil so I have a really, really sharp tip so that I can come in and add a very fine edge to my greeting here. So I've zoomed in quite a bit. You can really see I'm going in with a very, very light hand. I kind of like adding a line at the edge of what this greeting would be, and then very gently adding a little bit of shading underneath. So I want the shadow to be more pronounced on the bottom and also on the right side. So I'm coming through and just adding more and more shading. I'm building up that color. It looks pretty good at this point. You can kind of see that shadow starting to form. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time and keep adding more and more shading. When it comes to the top and right edges, I didn't add much shading other than to just draw that line around the edge. Might have added a tiny bit of shading, but like hardly any at all. I then grabbed a brown colored pencil, or I used brown before, now I'm using black. And I'm just adding the black right up at the edge of the greeting. I'm just adding that in. I just wanted to deepen the shadow a little bit. And that finishes the card. This was super fast and easy. I think I created this card in under an hour. It looks really neat and goes through the mail without any problems since it's just one layer. So that's something you can do to use your dies, but not have it directly on the card itself. Instead, you're going to use it as a mask and then add a little bit of a faux shadow with colored pencils. Thanks for watching today. If you'd like to watch some more videos using retro flowers, I've got this week's live replay linked down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon with more inspiration for using the Retro Flowers bundle.